The history of citizenship education as an official element of the educational curriculum in America effectively dates back to 1916 when the Committee on Social Studies, which was a branch of the Commission on the Reorganization of Secondary Education, installed it as the principal objective of teaching social studies. This motion was largely a reaction to that era's influx of new immigrants onto American soil and ultimately into American classrooms. And in order to both preserve and foster national solidarity, social harmony, cultural cohesion, and political stability, citizenship education was seen as an instrumental instrument. As one of the intrinsic purposes of social studies classes to bring historic background, geographic context, cultural relevance, intellectual outlook, and a democratic ethos to contemporary issues and their multiplicity of discourses, the delicate but mammoth task of citizenship education was delegated to teachers of the social studies ilk, as James J. Carpenter invokes and reflects on John Dewey in writing, quote, "The unique nature of the social studies having a more intimate relation with social life than a great many of the other subjects that are taught in school seemingly made it the ideal vehicle to promote the basic democratic end of the development of a more intelligent citizenship," unquote. What the prevailing overarching concept of citizenship education entails is instilling students with core civic values that reflect the spirit of the American democratic system and the fabric of American culture. However, in 1994, the National Council for Social Studies expanded on the aforementioned aim to integrate a goal that was adapted to suit a more complex population. This multicultural phenomenon, which has enveloped the United States since the watershed 1965 Immigration Act and opened up its borders to the Third World, caused an educational framework known as multicultural citizenship education to crystallize. Proponents of this framework advocate not only for civility education, but rather, quote, promote the revision of the total curriculum to reflect accurately the multicultural composition of society and diverse groups' contributions to society, unquote. This citizenship education paradigm saw the prior practice of imbuing core American values not so much supplanted, but rather merged with a new endeavor that emphasized equipping students with the tolerance necessary for them to comport themselves in a manner that aligns with a pluralistic and universally egalitarian society. Effectively, citizenship training unofficially evolved into civility training, which entails exhibiting respect and practicing restraint. Practicing restraint in a culturally blended society that is characterized by morals, views, and visions that are often antithetic and antipathic towards each other. Whereas fervent debate is healthy, civility training seeks to safeguard against flaring hostilities that potentially arise from a climate of hyper-diversity. Because the democratic system theoretically flourishes from and is fueled on the integration and compromise of ideas, worldviews, and values that are inherently at loggerheads with each other, citizenship education from a pluralistic perspective ought to pretty much parallel that which preceded it. However, teachers have struggled to ascertain fundamental ways to incorporate diverse perspectives into a stalwart system of educational Eurocentrism. Oxymoronic as the moniker multicultural citizenship education seems, the concept calls for an entire reconceptualization of the social studies curriculum. That is, not merely including content about heroes, holidays, customs, and contributions of underrepresented cultures, but also educating on the dynamic of power relations, providing multiple perspectives on events and issues, informing on how knowledge is constructed, developing an intercultural consciousness, and combating various forms of prejudice that are embedded in socioeconomic hierarchies. In this sense, multicultural citizenship education mirrors a broader concept known as equity pedagogy, which is, quote, defined as a process whereby teachers modify their teaching to facilitate the academic achievement of all students from diverse cultural, racial, linguistic, and socioeconomic backgrounds, unquote. However, in circles of educational scholars, the dialectic that emerged from this agenda pitted against each other ardent advocates of two conflicting ideologies: assimilation and cultural pluralism, as the former favored social studies as being a national identity builder and social binding agent, whilst the latter championed that the citizenship initiative ought to serve as an avenue for expressing, emphasizing, and embracing diversity. Proponents of assimilationism defend that the contemporary brand of diversity has actually intensified the need for a more traditional approach to citizenship education, which implies a return to its origin intentions that cultural pluralists would likely indict as antiquated. Notwithstanding the central planks that citizenship education encapsulates are civic action, personal responsibility, sound decision-making for the utilitarian good, participatory democratic action, a justice-oriented mindset, community service, and critical thinking and analysis abilities in understanding societal problems. However, even in its essentialist form, several questions still linger, such as precisely what type of citizens are we trying to mold anyhow, or what exactly constitutes an exemplary citizen? Joel Weisheimer and Joseph Kahn outline three forms of citizens, which are the personally responsible citizen, the participatory citizen, and the justice-oriented citizen. Whilst all beneficial to society, these distinctive perspectives determine their contextual presence in the social studies curriculum. Moreover, the advantage of certain types of citizens come at the detriment of others. For example, a personally responsible citizen may neglect civic action and feel apathetic and apolitical toward injustices due to their meeting their socio requirement on an individualistically oriented level. Conversely, a radically involved citizen with a disposition for social justice and a predilection for dissent may evidence a lack of critical analysis skills necessary to scrutinize and understand the depth and breadth of complex issues that is imperative to formulate sound positions on them. Another enduring question in citizenship education is, should we educate for acquiescence to the perennial democratic paradigm that is perpetually bogged down in constitutional quagmire, or should we instead teach to identify existential problems and encourage political dissidence, social unrest, and economic upheaval, as both approaches are inherently democratic? One surefire way to fundamentally build citizens of good character is explained by Rahima C. Wade, in which she asserts that community service is an ideal exercise to incorporate in the social studies curriculum for the purpose of inculcating students with a sense of engagement, altruism, and agency in solving or simply understanding societal problems. Community service demonstrates that the relationship of citizen to society is intrinsically a symbiotic one, and that the only instrument for social advancement is through the actions of involved citizens. In this vein, whilst personal responsibility is vital, hyper-individualism lends to the atrophy of social advancement. Therefore, community service is an excellent way to shape a justice-oriented mindset. Some other concomitant questions coupled with citizenship are, should political neutrality be exercised? Are there in fact right and wrong answers to enduring social dilemmas? If so, then are we not privileging certain political preferences? In this sense, social studies teachers must be prudent when educating on civic action. It is no secret that the United States and the broader Western world are evolving each year into more and more of an ethnically ambiguous amalgam. Nevertheless, social cohesion, political stability, and communal and national solidarity remain the vital vehicles for preserving the very society that attracts such divergent peoples to our lands and disparate students to our classrooms in the first place. As policies, stories, and clashes of the identitarian ilk continue to dominate the national discourse and weigh on the American collective conscience, something formerly automatic and innocuous as citizenship education and social studies class becomes an issue shrouded in debate which transcends the educational pedagogic sphere. Ultimately, if we are going to continue to be a nation that is peaceful, progressive, and recognizable, then ingraining students with the values, virtues, and heritage of the American democracy via citizenship education in social studies class is integral in cultivating future generations that will do their part in keeping it intact.